Today, I'm using the Karpman drama triangle to explain how Marxist and neo-Marxist ideologies essentially organize human beings into social structures that require constant human sacrifice. To describe the triangle itself, I'll be reading abbreviated passages from the Wikipedia entry on the phenomena, which I'll link to in the low bar, as well as original copy regarding the interplay between the triangle and neo-Marxist ideologies. The Karpman drama triangle models the connection between personal responsibility and power in conflicts and the destructive and shifting roles people play. He defined three roles in the conflict: persecutor, rescuer, and victim. Karpman placed these three roles on an inverted triangle and referred to them as being the three aspects, or faces, of drama. Karpman chose the term drama triangle rather than the term conflict triangle, as the victim in his model is not intended to represent an actual victim, but rather someone feeling or acting like a victim. The roles in Marxist narratives directly analog onto the roles in the Karpman triangle, and neo-Marxist roles analog obviously onto Marxist roles. The Marxist version of the victim is the proletariat, and the neo-Marxist versions of the proletariat are women, visible minorities, LGBTQ, etc. The Marxist version of the persecutor is the bourgeoisie, and the neo-Marxist versions of the bourgeoisie are males, whites, heterosexuals, etc. The Marxist version of the rescuer is the revolutionary, and the neo-Marxist versions of the revolutionary are what we would call white knights, what they would call allies, and what most of us can agree are called activists. The victim's stance is poor me. The victim feels victimized, oppressed, helpless, hopeless, powerless, ashamed, and seems unable to make decisions, solve problems, take pleasure in life, or achieve insight. The victim, if not being persecuted, will seek out a persecutor, and also a rescuer who will save the day, but also perpetuate the victim's negative feelings. The rescuer's line is, "Let me help you." A classic enabler, the rescuer feels guilty if he doesn't go to the rescue, yet his rescuing has negative effects. It keeps the victim dependent and gives the victim permission to fail. The rewards derived from this rescue role are that the focus is taken off of the rescuer. When he focuses his energy on someone else, it enables them to ignore their own anxiety and issues. This rescue role is also very pivotal because their actual primary interest is really an avoidance of their own problems disguised as concern for the victim's needs. The persecutor, aka villain, insists it's all your fault. The persecutor is controlling, blaming, critical, oppressive, angry, authoritative, rigid, and superior. The difference between the persecutor and the Karpman drama triangle and its Marxist and neo-Marxist analogs, however, is that the bourgeoisie are not acting out their part in the triangle nearly as often as they are being cast in that role by the other participants. Now that the roles on the triangle and their respective Marxist and neo-Marxist analogs have been established, I have to point out that there are all kinds of ways people caught in such a triangle interact with each other, and you can learn about those various interactive patterns on the Wikipedia entry linked to in the low bar. This video, however, is specifically about the triangular dynamic at play within the context of Marxist and neo-Marxist social interaction. That said, I'll henceforth be dispensing with terms like white knights, males, or LGBTQ, and simply referring to the three basic roles on the triangle. The victim and the rescuer identify with each other, and their shared identity necessarily exists in contrast to the existence of the persecutor. There are times where this dynamic legitimately occurs. There are instances where a bad actor is victimizing someone and a benevolent actor intervenes on behalf of the victim, but the drama triangle is a contrived reproduction of such an event. In assuming this shared identity, one gains access to perceived benefits. They get to be part of an in-group that is never wrong, their moral triumph is guaranteed, but only so long as those who identify as victims or rescuers believe in this triangular version of reality in spite of any evidence or reason to the contrary. In other words, for this to work, participants must listen and believe. Anyone who does not so surrender their faculties of reason would be a threat to the narrative, except that the penalty for their unbelief is to be placed in the role of the persecutor. Since the victim is not really a victim, and the rescuer is not really a rescuer, it stands to reason that the persecutor is not really a persecutor. They are, in fact, a scapegoat. All the malignant deeds and intentions of the victim/rescuer's shared identity are projected onto the scapegoat via Kafkaesque show trial. While the triangle needs at least 3 participants, the number of participants has no upper limit. So when one person is put on trial like this, the number of inquisitors hailing from within The victim-rescuer identity can number in the dozens, hundreds, or even thousands.
Ask for an apology. It doesn't mean that the other person, instantly has to say yes.
Okay, so
The person has to think about what it is that you're asking for, what it means.
So then my question is,
For what? Tell me what it is.
My question, if I'm in the courtyard playing games, right, and I'm kicking around a soccer ball.
Exception is because other people have rights too, not just you.
Walk away. It doesn't deserve to be listened to.
An unsafe space here for all
did
students.
not-
Stay quiet. For all Stillman students. You understand that? As your position as master, it is your job to create a place of comfort and home for the students that live in Stillman. You have not done that. By sending out that email, that goes against your position as master. Do you understand that? Then
No, I don't agree with that.
Then why the fuck did you accept the position?
Because
Who
I have
the fuck hired you?
I have a different
You
vision
should
than you.
step down! If that is what you think about being a master, you should step down! It is not about creating an intellectual space! It is not! Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here! You are not doing that!
You're supposed to be
going
our
against
advocate!
that. You should be at the event, let's say, when you hear a Franco say that she doesn't know how to create a safe space for her freshmen in Stillman! How do you explain that? These freshmen come here, they think this is what Yale is? Do you hear that? They're gonna leave, they're gonna transfer because you are a poor steward of this community. You should not sleep at night. We're out, we out. You are disgusting.
Putting up all the posters, right? All the 4 posters. Yeah, they didn't last long.
I'm still here. I'm still here and I'm still standing up for open discussion.
Why are you defending it? No Nazis! No Nazis! Shame on you! You're shame on you! No platform for racism, no platform for homophobia. This is all Barra, fuck off!
Little fascist.
Yeah, fascist!
Shame on you.
Shame on you! Shame on you! This is all Barra, not you!
You're not
You
for
don't
open
represent
discussion.
my Barra!
You're anti-Muslims.
Anti-Muslim!
Shame on you.
Come over here, love! Stand against him!
Yeah.
I believe in open discussion.
No platform, no Nazis!
No platform for white supremacy.
No platform
Shame
for
on you.
Shame
Yeah.
on you. Look at me, white man. It's easy to say that. It's easy to say that as a white man.
I believe in open discussion.
You believe in a platform for hate, oppression, a platform for hate.
May I respond?
No, I'm not interested.
I believe in open
I don't
discussion.
care what you believe. I believe no Nazis. Never again.
I was going to say,
Open the doors then, if it's open discussion. Open the doors now.
Everyone just cover him. Just cover his shit.
We don't want you.
want you
Go
here.
away.
You better go.
Go.
You better go.
Go.
You better stop.
here.
We don't want you.
You're not welcome here.
I will
You
stand up.
you are not welcome here.
Welcome.
Go away. Go away.
I've got to stop, guys. Look,
Never mind
there's
the
too many of you.
Okay, one simple
I've had
question.
enough. Sorry, I can't do this anymore.
One simple question.
No, I'm done.
I thought we were statistically irrelevant.
If it was
Well, yeah,
not
I mean,
for the
like,
law,
I don't
and a
exist.
trans person asked you, would you please refer to me by they and them pronouns? Would you refer to them by those pronouns?
Might depend on how they ask.
So no.
Why do you have the authority to determine
please
whether or
refer
not
to me
they're
Why
worthy
do
or
I
not?
have the
Why
authority
do you
to
have the
determine what I say?
Why do you
What
have-
kind of question
Why do you
is
have the
that?
authority?
And the verdict was always the same, guilty.
You're insane.
In the same way a group of muggers will descend on an individual victim to overpower and take by force said victim's valuables, the victim-rescuer identity will descend on a single dissident to overpower and take by force said dissident's reputation, autonomy, and even their serotonin and dopamine. I don't mean that someone is getting a needle stuck in their brain and those chemicals are being sucked out. I'm talking about Peterson's famous lobsters and the way their serotonin systems react to victory and defeat. The winner of a conflict feels stronger and more confident, while the loser feels weaker and less confident. But because these show trials are manufactured victories rather than actual victories, those doses of serotonin and dopamine just aren't as satisfying as the real thing, leaving the mob collectively jonesing before long. As they crave more and more hits of that fabricated moral high ground, their standards will get lower and lower, and there will be more and more evidence of their antisocial methods of getting their fix, and those will be made known to greater and greater numbers of people.
No, I'm not saying that.
You're just
That's
saying
murderous.
things. You're saying it.
And I actually haven't said that.
You're saying that. So you're saying. So
I
you're
can
not going to say
seriously-
it's what you're saying.
And
So
so
you're
does
saying
emotion.
you're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies.
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that.
So
you're
if you
saying,
wa-
is that what you're saying? But still, women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really saying.
Depends on your measurement technique.
You basically saying. Well, you say you're saying. If you're saying.
Rely on.
But you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
As I explained in my feminist, non-feminist cooperation spiral video and infographic back in 2015, this just becomes a feedback loop of feminists freaking out because they're losing face and then losing face because they're freaking out. Again, links are in the low bar. I'd like to take this analysis back to how it relates to the 3 questions that we focus on at antifeministpraxis.com. What is feminism? Where do non-feminist people stand in relation to feminism? And what is to be done? First of all, what is feminism? It's an expression of a behavior pattern learned in a narcissistic family. Narcissists can't take responsibility for their failings, so they often scapegoat others. Narcissistic parents may designate one child as a scapegoat, or they may switch who takes the blame. In the case of the former, the kids get comfortable assigning blame to one kid, and in the case of the latter, they learn that it's either scapegoat or be scapegoated. Either way, when they grow up, they will naturally gravitate towards a social order whose ethical substrate is dependent on scapegoating. I must point out that it's not just Marxist ideologies that are held together by mandatory adherence to a kooky narrative that unduly vilifies a person or persons as tyrannical. I had a falling out with a right-winger whose company I quite enjoyed because I didn't just listen and believe when he told me there was this mendacious thing called the skeptic community and that Sargon of Akkad was its leader. Where do non-feminist people stand in relation to feminism? In enmity, whether they know it or not. Remember when Kaylee Cuoco declared that she was simply not a feminist and the ensuing shitstorm? Because the feminist version of reality exists nowhere but in the heads of its adherents, unbelievers by their very existence cast doubt on the whole comforting delusion, hence they are regularly subjected to trials, the only possible verdict being guilty. What is to be done? What is the best way to defeat these triangular delusions? To not engage in them. Step 1. Own your shit. Whatever a person refuses to own, they blindly project onto others. Step 2. Fight fair. Learn about logical fallacies and how to be charitable to your opponent, no matter what tribe they hail from. Step 3. Steel yourself against the fear of rejection. Many people who find themselves joining literal or figurative lynch mobs are often only there because they know that if they're not participating in it, they're on its business end. To listen and believe, to surrender one's critical faculties for the sake of social acceptance, is to resign oneself to the torch and pitchfork.